right. Hi, Leah. How are you? Did you have a good break?
I did. A little
Good,
tired
good.
today.
All right. Well, we have some exciting stuff to finish covering today's session. So we'll get back into our presentation. So let me share my screen. All right. Can you see my screen, Leah?
Not yet.
Uh-oh. Okay, let's go back. Share content. All right. All right. Are we all seeing what is challenging behavior?
We are.
All right. Again, feel free to unmute if you have any questions as we move forward in our training today. So we are at that top of the pyramid today. Again, we've been talking about that very top for only the very few children after we have been using all of our strategies and our training that we used at the bottom layers of the pyramid. And now we are finally at this very top of the pyramid, and we're going to talk about challenging behaviors. So we have a little activity. Today we're going to utilize the chat box. So we would going to ask you to chat and list a specific behavior you find most challenging when you're working with infants and toddlers. And you feel free to shout out also, Leah.
Okay. I think this is a tough one. I'm going to go with something that we have going on in the classroom now, and that's biting.
Biting, yep, that is a very challenging behavior. It's really hard to figure out what the goal of that challenging behavior is. Do you have any thoughts about what might be happening with that behavior?
I'm thinking for this little one, it might be, and this is in our younger toddler class, so our 1 to 2-year-old class. And I suspect it might be when a friend comes too close to them, like in their space.
Okay.
And that may be the way that they're letting that peer or that friend know that they need more space.
All right. So you think the goal of the behavior is more about letting people know that they need space and they want other people to give them that space.
Yes.
Okay. And that's so easy to do with toddlers because they all want to be right there by each other.
Especially when they're also competing with, for attention. So, for the teacher, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right. So the one that came to mind for me is like a child who cries a lot. And that crying beyond where it's going for very long periods of time, where it's very frequent, where it's affecting how the classroom flows and functions. And I think that can be a really challenging behavior sometimes in infant and toddler rooms, and figuring out kind of what that goal is of that crying. Can be so difficult, I think, sometimes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's funny because that was what I was going to say, but they're going, oh, no, let's do it biting.
Well, we get to do both of those two things. So CEFL's definition of challenging behavior is any repeated pattern of behavior that interferes with learning or engagement and pro-social interactions with peers and adults, behaviors that are not responsive to the use of developmentally appropriate guidance procedures. So a challenging behavior is something like we kind of talked about. It interferes with learning or interferes with their ability to positively interact with peers and other adults. And if you think way back to our very first time we met together, when we went through all that data and remembering that not having the opportunity to have those pro-social interactions with peers and adults, how greatly that affects their outcomes further in their development. So challenging behaviors are just that, challenging. And but if we can work really hard at supporting these kids, then we can make a huge difference in their lives. So using all of those pyramid skills that are data driven to help us figure this big question out. And so these are behaviors that are not responsive to the bottom part of the pyramid. So we've already tried having an effective workforce. We're working together with our co-teacher. We've worked with our administrator. We have looked at the environment, and we've got, look at some of those green areas of the pyramid. So, we've taught friendship skills, and we've done emotional literacy and problem solving, and we're still having this challenging behavior. So we'll kind of keep that in mind. So there's lots of different reasons for challenging behavior. The developmental surge, could be medical reasons, biological differences. Do anyone want to tell me what they think that might be? Biological differences. So maybe we can think back to like different temperaments, like we were all born different and we all kind of have different personalities. And that temperament, which is part of who we are, some temperaments might be more prone to developing challenging behaviors than other temperaments. Some temperaments make it more difficult to participate in pro-social activities than other temperaments. Also, at that discontinuity of care between the program and the home, lack of skills in interacting with others, and it can also be a combination of a lot of those different things. So we have a little activity. So you should have handout 3.4 that I sent to you. So if you want to get that out, if for some reason you don't have it printed out, you'll just need these 4 columns right here to kind of reflect on a circumstance that maybe you have had with one of your families that kind of has developed into an opportunity for a challenging behavior. So I'll just give you a little example. We'll walk through one, and then I'll give you some time to think through one. So a family circumstance that happened in my family, it was, exciting, but my daughter and her husband bought a new house. They put their old house on the market and it sold in one day. And so they needed somewhere to live for about 4 months. And so they moved into my dad's basement. So Margaret, my granddaughter, they just took, the bare minimum, put everything in storage. So she just had her bed and her dresser, some of her toys, and was in this new environment. So that was kind of the family circumstance. Thinking about how the parents might have felt, I'm sure it was stressful to have to move and to not have your own things and to not have your own space. So I'm sure the parents were likely feeling a lot of those things. And they identified child's experience. She also didn't have her space. She was in a new place, didn't have a lot of her own things, new family members that they're living with. So those could be some of her experiences. And the caregiver actions that could help relieve her distress was just keeping things very consistent here. Like even just like moving her bed to a different place in the classroom, was a tragedy. We had lots of emotions just about any little changes. So one of the things that the caregivers did were just being super respectful of her need for that continuity. So I'm going to give you a minute to kind of think of something in your program and that has had a family circumstance, and you can just kind of go through, put yourself in their shoes of what happened or what you think you could do in order to relieve that distress for that child. So I'll give you just 2 minutes to do that. Are you good, Leah? Do you have any questions before we start?
I think I'm good.
All right. Shout out if you need any support or anything while we're taking a minute to fill this out. About 1 more minute. All right. Are you ready to share, Leah?
I am. I don't know if this counts though, but I'm going to say it anyway. So we have a little one in our older infant classroom who would cry a lot, like the inconsolable crying. And we suspected a developmental delay on the kiddo's part. And so we're having discussions with families. So I don't know, does this count as a family circumstance, a developmental delay?
Sure. Well, how do you think the parents are feeling about her crying at school all day?
Well, and that's the thing, is the parents would say that doesn't happen at home, that she's fine at home. And then when we were expressing concern about developmental delay, then the parents were saying, well, we'd feel more comfortable if the doctor had taken a look at her. And then whatever the doctor advises, that's the one that we will follow. So, so that's kind of the circumstance on that. I think for the parents' feelings around that, about not, I don't want to say not taking our concerns seriously, but I'm wondering if the parents were a little afraid of what they might find for their child, if that makes sense. Like they're a little scared that there might be a developmental delay, and so that might be, that hesitation on their part to move forward with any referrals.
Sure, that would have a lot of apprehension maybe for parents to feel that way.
Yeah, and then depending on where their trust lies too, like putting more trust in the medical provider rather than the teachers.
Sure. So, how long have your teachers known the family?
Not very long. And there's probably some cultural things going on there as well for the family. Yeah. So that's another family circumstance.
Sure, the parents might feel more comfortable. They might have known the doctor longer. So maybe that's where their most comfortable relationship might be.
Right. As far as the identified experience of the child, in the classroom, I know that her peers were eventually not wanting to play and would avoid her. And so I imagine that was difficult for the child.
Sure.
Let's see. And I think also because she was so high needs with the crying that sometimes her needs were not met when she needed them to be met, just because of the context of child care, right? There are other children that we have to attend to, and you've been loved, all of your needs are being met. So that might be for her. She may not have felt that her needs were being met.
Okay.
And
Do
then
you think you kind of talked about the parents being kind of afraid and apprehensive. Do you think the child might be afraid and apprehensive?
um probably
Maybe if she's new to your program. All
yeah,
right.
new to the classroom. She's not new to the program, but new
Okay.
to the classroom. um
Okay.
And then as far as the caregiver's action on how to support this kiddo, they're doing amazing. So they made sure that all of her physical needs were met, but then they also love on her a lot. And also, are concerned and, try to help her as much as they can. Which then I'm sure while she also feels like her needs aren't being met, but when they are being, when she is being held and she's being rocked and loved on, I'm sure that feels amazing to her, because then she has one teacher that she just settles with, uses her as that self-regulation. So I don't know, does that count?
Yeah, that was all of those things. So the caregivers, they're trying to meet her needs, and by giving her some extra TLC. So yeah, they're trying to take actions to help support this challenging behavior that's happening.
Right. While also trying to balance their own, like self-regulate themselves. Because having a kid who does cry a lot does take its toll.
Yeah, it can be very stressful on the care providers and the rest of the classroom. And, crying, when it's, happening often, happening for very long periods of time, to where it's affecting the ability for those pro-social interactions with caregivers and with peers, that's definitely a challenging behavior. Meets all the criteria of that definition. All right, so we're going to kind of go back to that relationship-based approach, which is what we use, that relationship-based, that evidence-based approach to examining those challenging behaviors today. So behavior is a form of communication. And so when we work with really young children, they don't have a lot of those verbal communication skills. So we have to kind of put ourselves in their place and try to figure out what this infant or toddler is experiencing. What is it like to be in that child's body? And what is it like to be in that child's world? So here is the famous iceberg picture. I love this analogy, in that behavior is just the very tip of the iceberg. It's what we're seeing, hearing, and dealing with on a moment-to-moment basis. And what's underneath the water is this potential unmet need or a skill, maybe that the child has not yet developed. So expression of emotion, what is the intensity, what is the frequency, and what is the duration? So we kind of just talked about that in Leah's example of the prolonged crying. All right, so here we go. A 6-month-old cries for long periods of time unless held by his caregiver. So what is the tip of the iceberg, and the behavior? Anybody want to chime in?
That would be the crying.
Right. So now the hard part, what is the social emotional skill that is needing support, or what might be the ongoing needs or possible unmet needs of this kiddo? So this is where the real work starts, when we're trying to figure out this iceberg. So what social skill is needing support? Any ideas?
I'm guessing maybe self-regulation.
That would be my guess too. At some point, self-regulation, self-soothing. Toddlers, infants, we work really hard with infants on that self-soothing skill. But depending on what the culture is in their home, how much opportunity they might get or might not get to practice that skill. If they live with grandparents and grandparents just, want to hold them all the time and they love them so much and they don't want them ever to be upset, they might not get very many opportunities to practice self-soothing. And so possible unmet need for this kiddo is maybe just they need supported opportunities to learn that self-regulation and self-soothing. All right, we have a little video clip right now, and we're gonna It's about what is biting trying to tell us. So we kind of talked about biting a little earlier. And so trying to figure out what is this trying to tell us? So unfortunately, I'm having trouble playing on my iPad. So let me switch us over here to a place where we can watch it. And we're going to kind of think about that iceberg as we're looking at this biting video. All right. So let's kind of just go back a slide to this iceberg. All right. What is the tip of the iceberg behavior?
That would be biting.
It would be biting. All right. What social emotional skill do you think is needing support?
I'm thinking.
What did you see?
So what I was seeing is a kiddo trying to acquire a wanted or desired object. So maybe some of that, the sharing, the taking turns, waiting or asking a friend, play, so many things that needed to be supported there.
Yeah, there was a lot of lack of problem solving skills.
Okay, problem solving. Yes.
Problem solving skills. So we're looking at, learning how to wait, learning how to ask for a turn, learning how to share an item, learning not to try to physically take things. Was the child's attempt successful?
Absolutely.
Was the challenging? It was absolutely successful. So what do we know about kids? We kind of talked about this earlier. Do kids use strategies that don't work?
No.
Not for very long. They're going to move on to something that works. So what might be going on for this child?
I have a question though for you too,
yeah,
or
sure.
A devil's advocate is he was also being provoked a little bit by his peer.
Sure. So what we would start with, like I said, lots of lack of problem solving skills. So, if you were the teacher in that classroom, what do you think might be going on for this kiddo?
Oh.
Start from the beginning. What did you see happen first?
I saw, oh dang, now I have to go back. I saw, the child, a peer or a friend had a block that he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And then bit the friend to get the block.
Which was successful, right? Strategy worked.
Right. Yes.
Kid dropped it and walked away.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And then what happened next? Does anybody remember? So the kid dropped it, walked away, picked up the big yellow block.
Yes.
And then what did the child who bit do?
If I remember correctly, it was so long ago.
They went for the yellow block, right?
Went for the yellow block, right.
So was it about blocks or was it about having something that someone else has? Interesting. Mm-hmm. So what might be going on for this kiddo? At first, you might think, well, he wants the blocks, but he was successful in getting the blocks. And then when a child dropped the blocks and picked something else, it was not about the blocks then. Interesting. I don't know. It might be, maybe there's some power things going on in that iceberg underneath. And that's our job. That's what we do in Pyramid, is we're trying to figure out this huge iceberg underneath. Like, what is driving that behavior? What is supporting that ongoing behavior? If it's successful, if biting gets me what I want, is there any motivation for me to stop biting?
No.
So what do you think the teacher might be able to do? And we're taking this like a little step further, but what do you think the teacher might be able to do to kind of address that challenging situation?
Well, my gut instinct is we need more data to understand what's behind that behavior, right? Just as you were saying, it's not about the block.
Right.
So if it's not, so if it's not about the block, then what is it? But then I'm wondering too, is it about entering play?
Right. Is it initiation? They don't know how to initiate play. They only know how to bite to get someone's attention.
Right.
Or to obtain the object that someone's playing with. But once the other child dropped the blocks and moved away and picked up something else, then they wanted that. Yeah, Leah, that's great. Maybe this is about initiation. Yeah. And so, as a teacher, there's a couple things you could do there. Anybody got any ideas of a couple things maybe the teacher could do to help this situation?
To like initiate play?
We're guessing. Yeah, if you're the teacher, what could you do to initiate play? What could you do to make biting not an effective strategy?
Not an effective strategy. Well, I think it goes back to like teaching social skills, like during circle time or something, with modeling. Yeah. You could do stories. If it was truly about the toy, you could have multiples of the same toy.
Yeah. Look at you and all of those teacher skills you could try. Yeah, all of those things you would want to do because you would not want the biting to continue to be successful. So, when we talked about those friendship skills, supporting friendship skills, the teacher could maybe be there knowing that that's going to be a challenging situation to support those friendship skills, to help them kind of work through that friendship skills and into problem solving, because as long as biting gets the desired item, then I don't think the biting's going to stop. All right. That's all we practiced so far. All right.
Okay. So the audio visual, I gave you an M. You just seamlessly moved from, your tablet to your computer. I liked, I just made it have less to do with the audio visual, but really the way you presented is that I love that you asked me if I could see this. When I asked, I said, can you see my screen? But I like the way you asked, can you see? And that was like the specific screen name, like what is challenging behavior? I liked how you did that. You recapped what we discussed last session. You paraphrased the slide. So you read the slide, but then you paraphrased the information that was there. Love that the fact that how you just give examples to certain things, so it makes it easier for the participant to come up with their own. So I like that. The activity skills, I gave you also an M. I don't know if you've taught this before, but you seem very comfortable with the material.
I use it a lot.
Okay, because I was like, dang. I liked how you gave the 1 minute warning when I was doing the exam or the activity. Again, you rephrased my example that I gave to make sure that I knew that you understood what I was saying.